She was only 6 years old. An orange pumpkin costume, a plastic bucket swinging in her hand, and a blue whistle she never stopped blowing. That Halloween night, she walked down a street lined with glowing porches and vanished into the dark. No sound, no struggle, just a trail of candy scattered across wet leaves, and silence. 17 years later, someone knocks on the same door. Rain falls, the porch light flickers, and standing there is a young woman wearing that same costume, the same whistle, the same wide green eyes, whispering, "I think I'm home." This is the story of a sister who spent half her life searching for the truth, of a girl who was taught to forget her own name, and of a door that, once opened, would change everything. Before we begin, tell me, where in the world are you watching from? I read every single one, and I love seeing our community connect from all over the world. Halloween in Burlington tasted like cold apples and wet iron. Porch lights blinked on along South Union Street, turning the sidewalks into a ribbon of honey gold. Paper ghosts snapped on railings. A fog machine down the block poured a pale river that pooled in the gutter where acorns clicked. 17 years had sanded every porch step and softened every voice that still said her name. Rachel Moore cut the engine one house shy of her mother's. In the passenger seat, the banker's box waited. Police reports, a map with red circles, and the last Polaroid of a 6-year-old in an orange pumpkin costume. On the floor, the old plastic candy bucket lay on its side, handle up like a question. Inside, the blue whistle rattled when the car settled. It was her private ritual, keep the evidence close so the anger stayed useful. She climbed the porch stairs that still complained in the same places. A lamp glowed behind the lace curtain. When the door opened, the smell of lemon oil and laundry slid out first, followed by her mother, smaller than memory, cardigan sleeves pulled over her hands. "You're early," Helen said, eyes flicking past Rachel to the street, as if checking the weather could change history. "I'll fix the porch light," Rachel said, even though it worked. Fixing something with her hands made the hour pass without swallowing her. They moved like dancers trying to recall steps. Rachel stood on a chair, pretended to adjust the bulb, then climbed down and set the old candy bucket on the hall table. The blue whistle looked wrong beside the fresh bag of mini chocolates. She lined them anyway, a boundary between then and now. Across the street, a boy tested a Darth Vader voice modulator and startled himself into laughter. A mother tugged mittens through a ladybug costume and kissed the felt crown. The ordinary world exhaled, indifferent and tender, in the same minute. "You brought the box," Helen said, not asking. Rachel nodded. The banker's box sat open on the couch, like a wound. On top, Sophie's Polaroid. Front teeth gone, the costume's felt stem crooked. The blue whistle clutched the way other kids clutched wands. Rachel had been 15 the night her sister vanished into a street of pumpkins and porch lights. She remembered Sophie practicing the route in daylight, down to Maple, left at the Painted Cat, back before the church bell. "I'll be so fast," she had said, spinning until the world blurred. "Do you ever think we—" Helen's sentence stopped at a familiar cliff. "I'll check the doorbell," Rachel said gently. The brass plate had dulled to the color of old honey. When she pressed the button, the chime answered, bright and domestic, and Helen flinched anyway. Outside, twilight leaned its shoulder down the hill. One by one, porch lights stitched themselves into a pattern the town never planned, but always repeated. For weeks, Rachel had practiced a different ritual. Arrive before dark, test what could be tested, keep her mother's hands busy with simple tasks, and say nothing about the podcasts or the anonymous email that had arrived in September. A single-line subject, she was seen. The body of the message held only an image, too grainy to help anyone but a sister. A woman in a rain-slick street, the curve of a cheekbone too familiar, the edge of an orange fabric at her wrist. Rachel hadn't shown Helen. Not yet. Rachel set the whistle beside the full candy bowl, a cheap plastic moon, ringing shining wrappers. She stood at the threshold and listened. Screen door springs, bicycle chains, a train horn dragging a gray ribbon over the lake. For a breath, time held still, like the moment before a diver breaks the surface. A squeak, fast steps, a small voice, breathy with practice. Trick or... Rachel Moore believed in paperwork the way some people believe in prayer. Forms had fields, fields had answers, answers fenced chaos. At Chittenden County Family Services, her desk lived under fluorescent hum and a bulletin board of missing child flyers pinned in tidy rows. She updated them herself after staff meeting, when the copier's warm breath felt like a small animal in the room. Her supervisor called her reliable. Clients called her Ms. Moore, and sometimes Rachel. After the third visit, when she had earned the right to sit on floors and listen. She could read a kitchen the way detectives read a scene, rinsed bowls or congealed, coats clustered by the door like people waiting to leave. When parents lied, their eyes slid right. When kids lied, they looked straight at her like divers holding breath. She didn't brag, she simply filed what she saw. At home, Rachel organized what could be organized. A shoe rack by the door, a calendar with color blocks for court dates, home visits, and mom dinner. She ran before dawn along the bike path by Lake Champlain, city lights wrinkling in the water. A thin silver bracelet clicked on her wrist, her father's last gift, the week before his heart attack, a reminder to look after Helen when he couldn't. The clasp knew her pulse. Friends existed in theory. Nora Bennett, a journalist she met on a case, texted links at 2 a.m. with the caption, "For your wall, not your soul." Dr. Lucas Avery, a forensic psychiatrist who consulted for the county, had said, "Grief wasn't a line, but a weather system. You learn its seasons, not its obedience." Rachel kept both at the careful distance of colleagues who might become friends if the ground ever stopped tilting. She did not say out loud that Sophie's footsteps still lived in the house of her head. She bought the same Apple hand soap Helen used in 2008 because scent is a trapdoor to a room you can visit without breaking. She learned codes, how to request archived 911 calls, which retired cops answered old case questions, which judges had grown up in town and understood how a small city folds a secret until it looks like tradition. Order was how she breathed. Once a month she visited Detective Frank Halpern, retired now, in a bungalow that smelled like pipe tobacco and pine sol. He'd kept his spiral notebooks from the 2008 case, pages salted with coffee. He let her read at the kitchen table because he trusted her to hear what the pages actually said. "You were 15, he would say, not as accusation or comfort. "No one watches every second." "I watched the wrong ones," she'd answer. He poured coffee into a mug that read, "Old Men Rule," and pretended not to hear her catechism. Helen lived inside smaller weather. On good days she asked for a drive past the old elementary school, or the church, whose bells once marked curfew, "Be home," by this song. On hard days, she left the key in the fern and texted from the porch, unable to cross the threshold, because sometimes thresholds are cliffs. Rachel catalogued her own cliffs. Night driving in rain, the basement stairs at Helen's, a thrift store rack with a small orange coat. She built workarounds, park under streetlights, leave the basement door open, buy the coat, and donate it out of town where it couldn't surprise her again. Strength and fragility learned to share a drawer. When the anonymous email arrived in September, subject line, "She was seen," Rachel did what she always did. Test the claim. She checked metadata, traced the IP through a VPN to nowhere useful, searched for similar images, filed a right-to-know request for traffic cam footage on rainy nights within 16 blocks. She made lists, then lists of lists. Houses painted blue, streets with dead ends, any missing person in Vermont who could be mistaken for Sophie by height and age. Lucas once suggested she try EMDR therapy, and Rachel surprised herself by agreeing. In a quiet office with a metronome and soft lamps, She followed a moving light with her eyes and told the story she never told straight through. The costume with the felt stem, the porch speech about staying on lit streets, the way the air changed just before the church bell. The sessions didn't erase anything, but they moved certain memories from the edge of the bed to a drawer, reachable, no longer tearing her sleep. Nora called after one appointment and left a message she pretended was a joke. If you ever need a friend who's terrible at boundaries but excellent at soup, I'm your girl. On October 31st, she printed the email and slid it under Sophie's Polaroid in the banker's box. She dressed in layers. Vermont could turn a lake breeze into a blade at sunset, and buckled the old candy bucket into the passenger seat like a witness she refused to lose. She was 2 steps from Helen's threshold when the bell rang. Then, through the wood, a small voice, high, breathy, familiar, whispered, "Trick or—" The doorbell's echo shivered through the old house. Helen froze mid-step, her breath catching on a sound she had heard 10,000 times in her head, but never again in her hallway. Rachel turned slowly, one hand on the doorframe. Through the stained glass panel she could see only a shape, small, motionless, haloed by drizzle and porch light. Another ring, 2 short, urgent notes. She opened the door. A girl stood there, or a young woman, maybe 20-something, but thin as a branch in November. Her hair clung wet to her face, her shoes squeaked against the wood, and she wore a child's pumpkin costume faded to rust. In her hands, a plastic candy bucket. The same model every Vermont store had stopped selling in 2008. "I think I'm lost," she said softly. Rachel's throat constricted. The voice was light, unsure, but the tone, that lilt at the end of each word, pierced muscle memory. Helen gasped behind her. "Sophie?" The girl's eyes lifted. Green flecked with amber, same as Helen's, same as Sophie's had been. "You know that name?" she whispered. Rachel stepped forward, her mind running equations. Her heart refused to compute. The bucket trembled. Inside lay a blue whistle, dull from years of handling. "Where did you get that?" Rachel asked. The girl blinked as if startled by the question itself. "It's mine," she said simply. "You told me not to lose it." A gust of wind snuffed the porch light, and darkness pressed close around them. They led her inside. Helen fussed with towels, hands shaking. Rachel fetched tea, but spilled half of it on the counter because her fingers wouldn't obey. The girl, this possible Sophie, sat on the couch wrapped in a blanket, watching the steam rise like she was trying to remember what warmth was supposed to do. "What's your name?" Rachel asked. The girl frowned. "Sophie, I think." Her voice carried the rhythm of a line half-remembered from a dream. "I'm not sure," she added quickly, as if apologizing for not studying before a test. Helen began to cry. "It's her," she whispered. "I can feel it." Rachel wanted to believe her. But training has its own gravity. Every missing child reunion she had mediated, every case of mistaken identity, every foster teen whose records had been rewritten by time. Belief without verification was how people broke twice. "Do you know where you've been, Sophie?" she asked gently. The girl looked towards the window, where the street lights blurred in rain. "A blue house," she said, "with trees that scratched the roof. There was a woman who brushed my hair before bed. She said Halloween was dangerous." Helen pressed a hand to her mouth. Their old neighbor's house, the blue one at the corner, had burned down in 2011. Rachel drove the girl to the police station the next morning. Detective Frank Halpern waited in the lobby, silver hair combed, coat buttoned high. He blinked twice when he saw the costume. "I thought that thing was evidence," he muttered. Then, more carefully, "Let's start slow." He took fingerprints, photographed the whistle. Ordered a DNA test with the calm efficiency of a man allergic to miracles. The girl cooperated but flinched whenever the flash went off. Rachel noticed bruises faint as smoke along her wrists, not fresh, not old enough to forget. Afterward, they sat in the car outside the station. The windshield was freckled with rain. "Do you remember me?" Rachel asked. The girl's answer came after a long silence. "I remember your voice," she said, from the other side of a wall. That night, Helen couldn't sleep. Rachel checked the locks twice, then went to the kitchen. The banker's box sat open on the table. Inside, among the files, lay a photo she didn't remember printing, a still frame from surveillance footage. Someone walking across a crosswalk under rain, orange sleeve bright under streetlight glare. Timestamp, October 31st, 2024. Rachel had searched that database herself. She had never seen this frame. Her phone buzzed, unknown number. Message: "Don't tell anyone she's home." She looked toward the living room. Sophie slept on the couch, curled beneath a blanket patterned with faded pumpkins. The whistle lay on the coffee table beside a mug of untouched tea. A floorboard creaked upstairs. Helen's door. Then another creak, farther away, wrong angle. Basement, maybe. Rachel froze, ears counting seconds. No one else had keys. She reached for the drawer where her father's old flashlight lived. When she turned it on, the beam caught dust swirling like snowflakes. She stepped down the basement stairs, one hand skimming the wall. At the bottom, something glinted. A second blue whistle, identical to the one upstairs, but she had buried the original police evidence years ago in a sealed evidence locker. Rachel's breath hitched. From above, a child's voice drifted down, soft, tired, almost rehearsed. "Rachel, can I go trick-or-treating now?" The power flickered once, then steadied. Rachel climbed the basement steps, holding the whistle like a fuse. Upstairs, the house had gone silent except for rain pressing the windows. On the couch, the blanket was empty. She found Sophie in the hallway, staring at the framed newspaper clipping on the wall. The 2008 headline that had frozen their lives. "Local girl vanishes during Halloween parade." The girl reached out and touched the glass with her fingertips. "That's me," she whispered, "but I don't remember being lost." Rachel kept her voice even. "Let's sit down, okay?" Sophie nodded and followed to the kitchen. The blue whistle rested between them like a negotiation piece. "Who sent you here?" Rachel asked softly. "No one," the girl said. "I just walked. I knew which way to go." "How?" "I saw a light on the hill, a pumpkin in the window. I thought maybe home." Rachel's training whispered statistics, imposters, trauma amnesia, implanted memories. But the cadence of Sophie's speech, the shy pause before answering, it all matched the child she remembered explaining candy trades and bedtime jokes. Helen entered in her robe, holding her inhaler. "She's exhausted. Enough questions tonight." When Rachel hesitated, Helen snapped, "She's my daughter." Rachel didn't argue. She simply pocketed the extra whistle and whispered, "We'll talk tomorrow." The next morning, Rachel drove to Halpern's bungalow. He was already on his porch, thermos steaming. "You look like you didn't sleep," he said. "She's in my house, Frank. And there's a second whistle that shouldn't exist." He poured coffee into a spare mug. "DNA's running. I flagged it urgent. But Rachel, sometimes people want miracles more than they want answers." "What are you implying?" "That this girl might believe every word she's saying." Rachel unfolded a photo she'd taken of the whistle. Same serial mark, same scuff under the mouthpiece. That means either the evidence locker was breached or someone copied it perfectly. Halpern rubbed his jaw. "You think someone staged this?" "I think someone wants us to stop asking." He didn't disagree. Instead, he reached for a yellowed file. Inside was a map of Burlington circa 2008. Red dots marking each house interviewed during the original search. "You remember the woman in the blue house?" Rachel nodded. "Marjorie Quinn. Died in the fire, but her property was tied to a nonprofit called Northview Youth Recovery Home. Closed in 2012 after complaints, abuse, unauthorized foster placements. Guess who approved half their funding?" Rachel's stomach knotted. "County Social Services." Halpern sighed. "Your department Before your time. He slid over a photocopy of an intake form. At the bottom, in faint pencil, child prefers name, Sophie. Back at the office, Rachel logged into the sealed archive. Old case numbers blinked like ghosts on her monitor. The Northview files were partially redacted, but patterns emerged. Several children listed with no release date, ages 4 to 7, all marked relocated, confidential. She cross-referenced addresses. Every one of them had been within walking distance of the burned blue house. Her phone buzzed. Message from Nora Bennett. Nora, heard something? Meet me at the Roost Cafe, 6 p.m. Bring no one. That night, Rachel arrived early. The cafe smelled of espresso and damp wool. Nora slid into the booth, her coat dripping. She placed a small recorder on the table. This came from a Freedom of Information request, she said. Audio from a Child Services hotline, December 2010. She pressed play. Static. Then a woman's trembling voice. They said she's not mine, but she calls me Mom. Please, if anyone asks, her name is Sophie. The call ended in a sob and the click of a receiver. Rachel's chest tightened. You traced it? Payphone near Barre, Vermont. The woman never identified. Before Rachel could reply, her phone lit again. Helen Moore calling. She answered and heard only breathing. Then Helen's broken whisper. She's gone. Rachel drove through rain thick as string. The house door hung open. Inside, lights blazed. Candy scattered across the floor like dropped coins. Helen sat on the stairs, shaking. She said she was cold, Helen murmured. I went to get a blanket, and the door was just open. Rachel grabbed the porch light, scanning the yard. Footprints curved toward the street, small, bare, recent. She followed them halfway down the block before they vanished into the puddles. Then, under the next street lamp, she saw it. The candy bucket, upright, perfectly centered on the curb. Inside, a folded slip of paper protected by a Ziploc bag. Rachel opened it. One line, child neat handwriting. If I tell you where I was, will you send me back? Her pulse hammered. She called Halpern. She's missing again. He cursed softly. I'll alert patrol. But Rachel barely heard him. At her feet, water pooled around her shoes, reflecting the glow of the lamp like an open eye. She whispered, whoever took her once never stopped watching. Rachel didn't chase the car. She memorized the rhythm of the signal, 2 blinks, a pause, engine idling low, and turned back toward the house. Patterns first, impulse later. She photographed the bucket in place, the water line inside, the folded note, her own hands to freeze time into facts. Then she carried the bucket inside like evidence on a tray. Helen waited at the kitchen table, knuckles white around a dish towel. Did you find her? No. Rachel set the bucket down. But whoever left this wants contact. She opened the Ziploc and smoothed the note again, studying the letters. The lowercase y curled back on itself the way Sophie's had in first grade. But it was too neat, too controlled, like someone had practiced a child's hand for a long time. Her phone buzzed. Halpern. Patrol's canvassing. No cameras on that stretch. The city's been replacing them, he said. I'll pull backyard ring footage. Stay inside. Rachel didn't answer. Her mind was already assembling a different picture. A blue house that burned, a nonprofit closed after complaints, kids listed as relocated, confidential, a second blue whistle in her basement that belonged in an evidence locker, and now a staged breadcrumb on a curb. She texted Nora. 2 headlight blinks? Seen that before? Nora wrote back immediately. Some transport outfits use it. Quiet pickup confirmation. Old habit from private security and halfway homes. Who's signaling? Rachel stared at the screen. Who indeed? She drove to Halpern's bungalow at dawn, fog lying low over the lawns like a patient animal. He opened the door in a sweater and socks, already reading her face. She's gone again, he said, not asking. I had officers out all night. Nothing. I think the person who took her is the same kind who returned her, Rachel said. Not one person. Maybe a network that kept running after Northview shut down. He poured coffee. A pipeline? Call it whatever you like, she said. But someone raised those kids to believe new names were safety. He led her to the kitchen table where his old spiral notebooks lay open. There was a lead we never chased hard enough, he said, voice rough. A maintenance man listed at Northview, Douglas K. Brandt. He bounced between shelters and youth homes from 2005 to 2013. He did the night shifts. He had keys. Rachel ran a finger down the page. Brandt. No address, just P.O. Boxes that changed every 2 years. Why didn't you chase him, she asked. Because we had nothing but a last name and 97 other kids to worry about, he said. Because your mother was collapsing and the press was circling and the DA wanted a win, not a ghost. He rubbed his eyes with the heel of his hand. Because I thought the Blue House fire killed the worst of it. Rachel flipped the notebook. A photocopy slipped free. A work order for the Blue House, roof repairs, August 2010, signed off by D. Brandt. On the bottom corner, a number was scribbled 214B. What's 214B? She asked. Room numbers, Halpern said. Northview had a basement wing. We never got access to the deeper level. Paperwork said mechanical storage. He looked at the number again and swore softly. We should have forced it. Rachel's throat tightened. 214. The brass plate she had seen outside the church basement during a Thanksgiving donation drive years ago. A door no one used. Frank, she said, what if recovery was a word they use the same way people use lost and found, not to return anything but to keep it moving? He didn't argue. He pulled on his boots. They drove to St. Matthew's, the stone church off Pine. The custodian remembered Halpern and let them in with a ring of keys big enough to anchor a boat. Down a set of narrow stairs, the air changed to iron and damp. At the bottom, half hidden by stacked folding chairs, a brass plate waited. 214. Locked for years, the custodian said. We use it for old hymnals. May I? Halpern asked, already kneeling. He tried the key ring, 1, 2, 5, until a key slid, old teeth finding at old grooves. The door sighed. The room smelled like paper that had learned to breathe dust. Shelves lined the walls. Boxes, too, hundreds of bankers' boxes, identical, labeled in cramped handwriting, 1984, 1987, 1990, 214B, 214C. A dead bulb hung from a frayed cord. Rachel reached up and pulled. The light came on, pale and astonished. Halpern slit the first box with his pocket knife. Inside, files, photocopies of birth certificates, medical forms, vaccination records, school photographs clipped to index cards with names blacked out and preferred names written underneath. On top of one bundle lay a Polaroid of a small girl in an orange pumpkin costume. The caption beneath, Sophie, hold for transfer. Rachel's legs went light. They cataloged them, she whispered, like parcels. She took a photo of the label. Her hands trembled, but the images came out crisp. Another box. Relocation Vermont Interior. Another, NH Placements. In a folder marked 214B Behavioral Notes, lines of blocky handwriting recorded a child's progress as if she were a project. No longer asks for sister after week 9. Start routine. Hair brushing. Reinforce. Halloween is dangerous. Rachel stared at the sentence. The ground titled, She didn't remember being lost, she said. They trained her not to. Halpern found a metal drawer on the far wall and slid it open. Inside lay a tangle of blue whistles, 15, maybe 20, identical to Sophie's. Some were tagged with dates, some were dark with age. He closed the drawer with a soft curse and leaned his forehead against the metal, as if the room itself had confessed. We need court orders, he said, and a chain of custody. We can't blow this by acting like vigilantes. We won't, Rachel said, already photographing everything in overlapping grids the way she'd learned at trainings. But I'm not leaving without copies. They copied labels, snapped folders, logged timestamps. When they emerged, eyes burning, morning had tilted into noon. Outside, the church bell counted 12 notes like a clock checking its own pulse. Halpern put a hand on the stone wall as if to steady it. "If this goes where I think it goes," he said quietly, "people we still work with will be implicated." Rachel looked toward the lake, a dull sheet under gray sky. "Let it go there." Her phone buzzed again. "Unknown number. Don't tell anyone she's home." The same message. The same threat. But now it read like a confession. Home was not a house with lace curtains. It was a file room with whistles in a drawer. Rachel typed back a single word. "Where?" Reply: "You already opened the door." They carried the evidence to the county building like a fragile organ. One wrong bump, and the whole body would die. Rachel insisted on scanning the files herself in the secured record room. As the scanner's light crawled across the pages, she forced her breath to match its pace. Don't faint. Don't rage. Record. In the fourth stack, a memo surfaced. Letterhead from Northview Youth Recovery Home, dated March 2011, signed by Program Director M. Quinn. Not the dead neighbor. This was Marjorie Quinn's daughter, Lila Quinn, who had taken over after the fire. The memo referenced continuity placements and quiet transfers for children without viable reunification prospects. Contact for transport, D. Brandt. Below, a list of donors and county partners. One name made Rachel's mouth go dry: Dr. Lucas Avery, noted as consulting clinician, trauma desensitization protocols. She read the line twice. Then, a third time. She didn't move. Halpern was across the room on the phone with the DA, arguing for a judge on a Saturday. He didn't see Rachel sit down, the memo fluttering. When he hung up, he watched her face change. "What?" he asked. She passed him the paper. He read it and swore under his breath. "Could be a different Avery." "There isn't one," Rachel said. "He's the only forensic psychiatrist who worked with the county back then. He helped kids, including mine." On cue, Rachel's phone buzzed. Lucas Avery. She swallowed and answered. "Rachel," he said, voice even, familiar. "Are you safe?" "I am," she said. "Are you?" A pause. "I assume you've found something." "Did you consult for Northview?" she asked. No preface, no script. "Yes," he said quietly. On paper it was to treat trauma. In practice it was to keep the peace between agencies that wanted fewer emergencies. I pushed back on some methods. "Some," she repeated. "Like what? Routine hair brushing to fix attachment? Telling children that Halloween is dangerous? Replacing names like a new set of sheets?" He didn't defend himself. "Where are you?" he asked. "In a place you should have visited with a warrant," she said. "Room 214. Another pause. When he spoke again, the professional polish was gone. "Please come to my office," he said. "I'll explain and I'll give you what you need, but not over the phone." She hung up without promising anything. Halpern paced, jaw tight. "We control the terrain or we lose it. If Avery sings, we protect the record. If he runs, we already have enough to open a state investigation." Rachel thought of the basement drawer full of whistles and felt something inside her click into one calm, cold line. "Let him talk," she said, "but in a room with eyes." They arranged to meet at Avery's office, a second-floor suite above a bookstore, glass door lettered in modest serif. Nora waited in the cafe across the street, ready to hit record on a long lens. Halpern parked around the corner with two detectives idling in a city sedan. The town bustled on a gray Saturday, strollers, coffee cups, dogs in sweaters, all the ways a community proves to itself that it is fine. Avery opened the door the second Rachel's knuckles lifted. He looked older than yesterday, hair mussed, tie abandoned. He closed the door and switched on a white noise machine that made the room feel padded. "I never touched her," he said. "I never hurt any child." Then, "Help me understand what you did," Rachel said. He sank into a chair. After Northview's fire, Quinn's daughter came to me. She said placements were urgent. She said if we didn't stabilize the children, counties would yank funding and they'd scatter. She wanted protocols, scripts, routines, words. I recommended consistent caregivers, predictable bedtime rituals. I said children needed safe, repetitive cues. Then Brant took those suggestions and turned them into rules. Rules like erasing Halloweens, Rachel said. Avery blinked hard. If a child's trigger is Halloween, you remove Halloween. That's benign in isolation. Nothing about this was in isolation, Rachel said. You were the expert whose signature sanctified whatever they wanted to do. They taught kids to forget their names. I argued for reunification when possible, he said. They said parents were unstable, that reunification would break the kids again. They showed me staged incidents to prove it. Who is they? Halpern asked from the doorway. He had let himself in silently, police ghosts being a habit he would never shake. Avery swallowed. Quinn, Brant, a county coordinator, Elena Rusk. She worked 2 floors down from you back then, Rachel. She controlled files, closed cases that didn't fit the narrative. Rachel's mind spat facts like sparks. Elena Rusk. Retirement party in 2019. Plaques, cake, hugs from judges. Rusk had sent Rachel congratulatory emails when she first joined the department. Welcome aboard. We protect kids. Rusk had walked the halls with a ring of keys. Where's Brant now? Halpern asked. Avery looked at the carpet. I don't know. He stopped answering in 2014, but he rose and crossed to a filing cabinet. He pulled a folder thin as a breath and handed it to Rachel. Inside was a photocopy of a transfer ledger with 5 names redacted and 1 left exposed by mistake. Not Sophie. A different child, Maya Kincaid. Transfer date 2011 note. Prefers name Lily. Rachel read it twice. The edges of the world receded, sound thinning. Say that again, she whispered. Avery frowned. I said the ledger was sloppy. Someone forgot to redact Maya Kincaid. It notes she preferred the name Lily. Not Sophie, Rachel said. Lily, my sister's name. The room seemed to tilt, then right itself. The anonymous email, the voice behind a wall, the staged handwriting, the question in the note. If I tell you where I was, will you send me back, not to this house, not to Rachel, back to who she had been assigned to be? Do you understand what you're saying? Rachel asked, voice low, even. The girl in my house believed she was Sophie because somewhere a child was told to take that name as safety. If you told kids to change names when frightened, then Lily could have been someone else's safety. And the girl who came to my door might have been Maya. Avery didn't correct her. He folded his hands as if in prayer gone wrong. I can contact Quinn, he said. She still answers me. Halpern shook his head. No contact. We go formal now. Rachel stood. The candy bucket in her memory glowed like a lighthouse burning wrong. You said staged incidents, she said. Show me what they staged. Avery hesitated, then crossed to a locked cupboard and opened it with a key from a chain he wore under his shirt. He withdrew a DV tape in a cracked case, labeled October, Training. He slid it into an ancient player on the shelf. The monitor blinked to life, grainy footage. A small room, felt pumpkins on a bulletin board. A girl in an orange costume sits at a table while an unseen woman brushes her hair. The girl looks directly at the camera once, quick, like a bird checking a window. Audio hums, then words. Remember, sweetheart, Halloween is dangerous. Another voice, lower, male. What's your name? The girl whispers, Sophie. The brush pauses. The woman's voice softens. Good, very good. Rachel put her hand on the wall to keep the room from moving. Who's the woman? She asked. Avery didn't answer. He backed the tape up and paused on her profile. A delicate jaw, stray hair pinned behind one ear, a ring on her right hand, a thin band with a tiny stone. Rachel knew that ring. She'd seen it at a retirement party over sheet cake and speeches. Elena Rusk. In the hallway outside, a floorboard squeaked. The white noise machine hissed. Halpern slipped to the door and looked. Empty. When he turned back, Avery was holding his hands out like a witness who wants absolution he cannot afford. "I thought I was helping them build safety," he said softly. "But I built the cage." Rachel took the tape. "You're going to help me unlock it." Her phone buzzed. Unknown number again. She answered and put it on speaker. A man's voice filtered like it had learned to speak through cardboard. "You made a promise, Rachel. Don't tell anyone she's home." "Where is she?" Rachel said, matching his calm. "Maya. Where is Maya?" Silence, then the faintest smile in the tone. "You've been busy." A car horn chirped twice outside, the same two-note signal. "Blue door, end of Pine, basement entrance, come alone." Halpern shook his head hard. No. He scribbled on his notepad. "Stall him." Rachel spoke into the phone. She asked if she told me where she was, I'd send her back. Back where? The voice exhaled, amused or tired, she couldn't tell. "Back to the only place we keep promises." The line clicked dead. Avery sagged. Halpern was already calling it in, voice low, giving cross streets and the instruction to stay dark. No sirens. Rachel stepped to the window. Across the street, Nora sat in the cafe, phone in hand, eyes on the building. When Nora saw Rachel's face, she stood. Rachel pocketed the DV tape and the transfer ledger. She picked up the candy bucket she'd carried into the car that morning, the one she had scrubbed by the sink as if plastic could tell the truth if you rinsed it enough. She pressed the whistle into her palm till it bit. "Don't be a hero," Halpern said, blocking the door for a second. "Be precise." She nodded. "I always am." They split, Nora trailing Rachel at a distance with camera rolling, Halpern circling wide with two officers playing ghost again. "End of Pine," the voice had said. "Blue door." The old Quinn lot had been fenced since the fire, but the next property, an unmarked duplex with peeling paint, wore a new coat of dull blue like a rotten tooth capped with porcelain. Rachel approached the side alley. A cellar hatch yawned at ground level, new padlock, fresh scuffs. Two headlight blinks flashed from the street, then died. Her heart ratcheted. Behind her footsteps, soft and careful, Nora's. Rachel crouched and touched the padlock. The metal was warm. "Someone's down there," Nora whispered, barely moving her lips. From inside the hatch a voice rose, thin, young, practiced quiet. "Rachel?" Rachel leaned close to the seam in the wood. "Maya?" she whispered. The name felt like a key turned for the first time. "Yes," the voice said, and broke on the single syllable like something thawing too fast. "They said I can go home if I say the right name." "You can go home if you say your own name," Rachel said. "What's yours?" She heard a breath, then, "Maya." Stronger this time, then a whisper, almost wondering, "I'm Maya." Keys fumbled above. A shape moved at the corner of the alley, broad shoulders, hood up, a hand checking a phone like he owned the time of everyone on the block. He looked up and saw Rachel and paused. His eyes were blank as a turned-off screen. "Delivery?" he asked, as if this were a joke that always worked. Rachel stood. The candy bucket hung from her left hand. The whistle pressed cold into her right palm. "Douglas Brandt?" she asked. He smiled without showing teeth. "I go by Doug." The moment Brandt smiled, everything narrowed. Sound, light, heartbeat. Rain hissed on the alley's asphalt. A delivery truck idled somewhere down the block, its reverse beep muffled by fog. "Step away from the hatch," Rachel said. Her voice surprised her. Steady, clipped, professional. Brandt tilted his head. "You've got the wrong idea. You're standing on a basement full of ideas," he shrugged. They were safer there than with the ones who sold them. Nora's camera clicked softly. Brandt's eyes cut toward the sound. "You shouldn't record ghosts," he said and moved. Rachel didn't think. She slammed the whistle against the padlock like a small hammer. The metal rang, Brant lunged. A shout echoed from the street. Halpern's. Tires screamed. In that single second of distraction, Rachel hooked her finger through the padlock's latch and yanked. It gave. The hatch sprang. Cold air spilled upward, sharp as freezer breath. Inside, a narrow stairway descended into dark. The voice below trembled. "Rachel?" "Stay there," she said, but her feet were already on the first step. Behind her, chaos. Halpern tackling Brant against the fence, Nora shouting coordinates into her phone. A whistle rolled from Rachel's palm, clattering down the steps, bouncing into shadow. She followed its sound. The basement was half finished, half forgotten. Concrete floor, plastic toys scattered like fossils, a cot against one wall. A child's backpack sat open beside it, contents neatly folded. Jeans, a toothbrush, a paper labeled Behavioral Progress, Maya Kincaid. On the cot sat the girl, knees to chest, costume gone, dressed in an oversized hoodie. Her eyes were wide, but not wild. "I told them my name," she whispered. Rachel crouched. "And what is it?" "Maya." The word landed like a bell struck true. "They said you'd be angry," the girl said. "I'm not," Rachel answered. "I'm just sorry." From above came boots on gravel, the stutter of police radios. Light from a flashlight cut the dark. Halpern appeared on the steps. "We've got him. He's alive." Rachel nodded, but didn't stand. She watched Maya's hands twist the hem of the hoodie into knots. "They told me I was Sophie," Maya said. "They said, if I said the other name, the bad people would find me." Rachel swallowed. "Who told you that?" "The woman with the ring, the one who brushed my hair." Eleanor Rusk. Outside, flashing lights painted the alley red, blue, red. Neighbors gathered, phones lifted like lanterns. Rachel walked Maya toward the cruiser, wrapped in a blanket. Nora trailed. Camera lowered now, eyes glassy. Halpern met them halfway. "Brant's talking," he said. "Says the network kept operating under Rusk after the closure. Quinn moved money, Avery signed forms, Rusk placed the kids. He says he delivered Maya back here tonight to prove loyalty, to show he could still reunite families." "Reunite," Rachel repeated, tasting rust. Halpern nodded toward the cruiser. "We'll need statements. DNA will confirm her identity." "I already know who she is," Rachel said. Maya looked up. "Will you still see me if I'm not your sister?" Rachel knelt to her height. "I see you now. That's enough." The girl hesitated, then handed over the whistle. "I don't need this anymore." Rachel closed her fingers around it. "I'll keep it safe." For the first time in 17 years, she didn't flinch at the word safe. Hours later, after the paperwork and the interviews, Rachel sat in the back of Halpern's sedan, facing the lake. Dawn bruised the horizon pink. The city was quieter than she remembered. A held breath after the sirens stopped. Halpern passed her coffee. "State's taking custody of the files. Avery's cooperating. Rusk is in custody." Rachel nodded. "It won't fix it." "No," he said, "but it stops the bleeding." She watched sunlight crawl over the water. "When I was 15, I promised Sophie I'd walk her every Halloween. I never kept it." "You did?" Halpern said. "You just took the long way around." Helen waited on the porch when Rachel brought Maya home. She looked smaller in daylight, but her hands were steady. Maya stopped at the bottom step. "She looks like you," Helen said. Rachel smiled faintly. "She's just herself." Helen opened her arms. For a moment Rachel thought the girl would freeze, but Maya stepped forward, the blanket slipping, and Helen folded her close. The wind off the lake smelled of leaves and sugar and metal. Somewhere a church bell rang, noon. Rachel lifted the candy bucket from the car seat and placed it on the porch rail. Inside lay both whistles, the old one and the one from the basement. Two small pieces of plastic, identical, harmless now. She took one last photo, not for evidence, but for memory. "Do you still believe in miracles?" Helen asked. Rachel thought of the boxes under St. Matthew's, the names rewritten, the children waiting for someone to call them true. She looked at Maya, laughing softly at a squirrel on the step. "I believe in survivors," she said. As she turned to go inside, Rachel's phone buzzed. One new message. "Unknown number. You only opened one door." Rachel didn't open the message right away. She sat on the porch step, elbows on knees, letting the wind dry the rain from her hair. The world around her looked ordinary again. Mailboxes, dogs barking, a neighbor dragging bins to the curb, but it all felt rearranged, as if someone had tilted the map an inch while she wasn't looking. Inside, Helen hummed softly, while boiling water for tea, and Maya's laugh rose through the hallway. High, uncertain, but real. Rachel wanted to live in that sound for a while before she looked at what the world might still be asking of her. When she finally unlocked the phone, the screen glowed with the same number that had haunted her for weeks. One new message. "Room 214 isn't the last." No signature, no threat, just a statement that felt like a door left ajar. She deleted it, but the weight of the words stayed. 2 weeks passed. Investigations multiplied like roots under wet soil. Halpern worked with state detectives, giving sworn testimony that sounded, to Rachel's ears, both heroic and haunted. Avery's cooperation peeled back layers of paperwork that reached further than anyone expected, across counties, across years, all stamped with signatures that looked like compliance and smelled like neglect. The public called it the Northview scandal. For the families, it was simply the day the phone rang and someone said, "We found her." Or worse, "We found her name." Rachel spent her days sorting files and her nights sorting feelings. Every child she had ever helped now had two versions in her mind, the one she met and the one hidden behind paperwork that had dared to rename survival as therapy. Sometimes Maya woke from dreams, whispering phrases that weren't hers. "Halloween is dangerous. Don't go outside." Rachel would sit beside her until the tremors passed, whispering back new truths. "You're safe. You can choose your own name." It became their ritual, an untraining. By November, Burlington's trees had shed their fire-colored leaves. The town replaced its porch lights with wreaths. Life, impatient as always, moved on. On the evening of the 17th, Rachel returned alone to St. Matthew's. The basement door was sealed now with a padlock and a state notice, but the brass plate still read 214, burnished by years of hands. She stood there for a long time, then set something on the ground, the candy bucket. Inside, a single whistle. She whispered, "For whoever's still waiting to be found." The wind caught the sound and carried it up the stairwell. Later that night, she walked along the lakefront. The water was black glass, and the city's lights shimmered on it like scattered stars. A child rode past on a scooter, orange scarf flapping, laughter echoing off the railings. Rachel leaned on the railing and let the moment settle, the hum of tires, the smell of wood smoke from distant chimneys, the steady rhythm of her own breath finally matching the quiet. She thought of Sophie, not as a ghost or a file, but as a pulse that had kept her moving when logic said stop. Sophie had been the beginning of the question. But Maya was the answer she hadn't known she needed. Hope, she realized, isn't the belief that you'll get someone back. It's the faith that what you lost will mean something when it's found. Back home, Helen had fallen asleep on the couch, a mug cooling beside her. Maya had built a tower of wooden blocks on the rug, each one painted with a letter. She looked up when Rachel entered. "What does this spell?" Rachel asked. Maya smiled shyly. "My name, Maya." Rachel nodded. "Perfect spelling." Maya added one more block on top, blank, and said, "This one's for her." "For Sophie?" The girl nodded. Rachel sat down beside her. Together they watched the tower lean, wobble, and finally stand, imperfect but upright, balanced on the smallest block that had no name at all. Outside, the wind rose again, rustling through the dry branches. Somewhere across town, another door creaked open, a simple, ordinary sound. easily ignored. But for a moment, Rachel imagined it echoed the same word carved into the brass plate of memory and loss. 2:14. She didn't turn toward it. Not yet. She just whispered, "We're home," and let the night keep its secrets.